You're driving alone on a dark country road in the early evening. As you approach a turn, your headlights catch a glimpse of what appears to be red eyes in the woods off in the distance. You've heard stories that there's something in the woods, watching and waiting. It's got large red eyes and can fly fast, really fast. Something that big shouldn't be able to fly at all, let alone keep up with a speeding car. It's just my imagination, you tell yourself. Just a deer or a possum in the woods whose eyes caught in my headlights. You're still not used to how soon it gets dark this close to Christmas. It's a cold, foggy evening, and you know how the fog from the river can play tricks with your eyes, especially when you've been working all day. You're just tired, and you want to go home so you can relax before dinner. A bit past the bend is the stretch of road that leads to the highway. From there, it's a short drive across the Silver Bridge, then safely to home.
As the toll from Friday's Silver Bridge collapse rose to 8 dead and 38 persons missing, a flotilla of boats was also...
Hello everyone, and welcome to Kelly Arts. Today we're going to be creating the inaugural painting in the Eldritch Collection, Mothman. Mothman was a creature requested by several people to be added to the list of possible subjects, and there were a lot of smiling, happy faces when it happened to be drawn first. So, my idea here is to make this a roadside sighting. We'll start by laying down an area of vague greenery, with nothing but a bunch of up and down strokes to give it a sense of lots of trees in the distance. Once that was dry, I drew a series of vertical chalk lines to help make sure that I would be painting consistently when adding my first batch of trees. These will be just the suggestion of trunks, and really won't be seen very much in the final piece, but will be there to add a sense of depth. I'll be building up the forest in layers, airbrushing in mist between each to push them further and further into the background. I'm not too concerned at this point if any of the lines look off. If something did look really weird, I will cover it with another tree in the foreground later on. Once I'm happy with my suggestion of trees, I block in the same dark color on the bottom to start building up the ground layer. This too will be covered with the airbrush mist. I'm mixing in a bit of color in the foreground area to start to help to differentiate the layer, pushing the blackish brown further back and creating a base for the next block of trees. I always feel better when all the raw canvas is covered. Plus, filling in the white area helps ground me in this world, pun fully intended. This was January when I was painting this, and my airbrush setting is in the garage. The only thing I have for heat out there is a little space heater on the table next to me to let me warm my hands. Needless to say, I was very quick about getting the mist applied. As you can see, the earlier trees are less distinct and feel further back than the ones I'm working on now. I will generally be more careful about creating these trees. They will be misted to the background later on, but they will be more visible. I'm using burnt umber to paint them. It's a dark brown, but lighter than the almost pure black of the more distant trees. I'm adding in some minor details, like the indication of branches, but nothing too extravagant. With all these little branches and saplings, I'm fast forwarding us some. I'm using my little palette knife here to block in more of the foreground for this layer. I was seeing if I liked the effect of giving it some impasto, but not sure if I do. Alright, now we're on to the third layer of trees. At this point, you get a sense of how far back the first layer has been pushed, as they are barely visible in the mist. Sorry about the glare from the lights. I had added a polarizing filter to my side lights and my camera, but this glare seems to be coming from the ceiling light. One of these days, I'll finally have all my lighting issues sorted. I'm generally working really hard at not completely painting over my background trees. Sometimes my brain sees the straight line and feels the need to follow that track. Most likely, if I were just painting this off camera, I would have the canvas flying flat on the desk and painting the trees horizontally, as that is a more natural motion for my arm to follow. Time to add little branches. And once again, block in the foreground. You might have noticed that the painting so far looks fairly light, but in the teaser it was clearly much darker. Well, that will be changing with the next airbrushing pass. This time, I airbrushed with a much darker color that still gives the foggy effect, but turns the scene into evening. Using a fan brush, I'm putting in the ground cover that the foremost trees will be anchored in and Mothman will be sitting on. Now I'm painting in the main trees. Everything else to this point has been background work. Okay, Kelly, we've talked about this. Don't paint over the background trees. It can be really hard to get the right consistency of paint on the brush to do the stroke that creates the little saplings or even the branches. Too watery and it looks transparent. Too thick and the paint either runs out or pushes the bristles of the brush outward and makes the line too wide. For the branches, We can take advantage of the widening effect by starting it at the tip and stroke towards the trunk. But only one side of the tree feels natural for my hand to do, sitting off to one side of the canvas the way I am. In retrospect, I could have fixed this by moving my chair to the other side of the canvas. But one doesn't always think of these things in the moment. Plus, that would have been interrupting my flow to rearrange my room, and I try to minimize that as much as I can. Once I stop, it can be sometimes hard to restart without something else distracting me. Executive dysfunction can be a bitch. Using a flat brush, we start peppering in the undergrowth under the trees. Through the power of awkward editing, chalk sketch! I was given a picture of the Rosy maple moth, which I'm told is native to the area, as an example of perhaps how Mothman might look. I'm doing Mothman in soft brown, like they're a natural creature that would blend into the background. I wanted to use a little glow-in-the-dark red for the eyes, but I cannot find red paint that does that. I'm still checking places that sell that kind of paint, but the spot for the red is always empty. I guess glow-in-the-dark red is very popular. Who knew? Alrighty, now that our little friend is all snugged in place, it's time to do all the rest of the trees. I'm going to start off blocking in the color and avoiding the area where the sign will be. No point in adding texture to the sign when it's mostly going to be flat. Mothman will be sitting just behind this large trunk, like they're using it for some cover. I decided the curved sign is old, really old, and is falling apart, hence the odd angle and the dull color along the edges. Once the edges are defined, I can paint more freely to block in the color. About now I decided filling in with this little brush was taking too long, and just brought out the palette knife to finish the task. Going over the edges again with our blocking color to make it all consistent. Let's fill in the signpost with some gray to block it in. Now, taking some darker brown, I start building up the shading on the trees. I decided the lighting of the scene is coming from the right, so the shadows would be on the left. In the story we've created, you, the viewer, are turning towards the highway, so it would make sense lights would be coming from that direction. Working in the lighter brown to indicate the lighting, and also give the bark some texture. Don't worry about the chalky white lines on the canvas. That is just from the copy paper I used to transfer on my lines, and it comes off with water. I bought it originally for sewing, and works great for tracing lines when you have a dark surface. It comes in a number of colors, like a rainbow of carbon paper. Here I'm using a brown wash to try to give the ground cover some more color. Adding in some dried grasses and other plants. I started to add lighter colored plants, but in the end I decided it really didn't work. I did one last airbrushing to make the foreground mist and to dull the plants, but I think it might have been too much. I also added a hint of white fog, too. So now we're painting in the sign. I'm going to paint in the black areas as if the sign were new, then later I will age it. You can't see the lines here, but I'm totally not freehanding this. I'm using a blue wash on the shadows of the trees to make them feel darker without using black. It sounds weird, but brown is really dark orange, and blue and orange are on opposite sides of the color wheel, so they complement each other. Lining up the yellow before I age it. This also gives me the opportunity to clean up the lines where I might have strayed with the black. Having to do additional coats because yellows are notoriously see-through. I know, I don't have to be perfect because it'll mostly be covered up, but tell my brain that. Time to add some rust. I started with a brush, but decided the palette knife makes more realistic oxidation. Masking the edges so I can go ham with the rusting. Also adding some black to make it a bit more realistic. Et voila! Thanks for coming along on this journey to create Mothman with me. I'm excited to see what the future months will bring for the Eldritch Collection, and I hope you'll be there with me. Bye for now. One of these days, I'll finally have my sorted issues lighting. It feels the need not... What is it doing? Time to add little branches. This time I airbrushed with It still gives the foggy effect, but turns the evening into ceiling. Ceiling? Using a fan brush to get the right consistency. Oh, why do I use these $5 words? By starting at the tip and stroking at the trunk. And that sounds so dirty.